Color is the foundation of great design. It can settle a building into its landscape. It can make an unattractive structural detail just disappear, and it can change your mood in a room instantly. Welcome to Let's Talk Color. I'm Amy Crane, architectural color consultant at Amy Crane Color. I'm a color expert and use color to transform spaces and products from the ordinary to the sublime. As a paint color specialist, realtor, and design writer, I've got my finger on the pulse of what's happening in the world of color. In each episode, I'll reveal best practices for choosing color by introducing you to masters of color for the built world. So throw out those paint chips taped to your walls and let's get started. I think I'm probably not alone confessing that sometimes I end up down a rabbit hole surfing on Instagram. We all know that the algorithms have changed over the past few years, and it's a lot less fun than it was. But I used to be sent some really inspiring profiles I wouldn't have known about otherwise. One of them was called Dagny Thurmann-Moe. I have to admit, not speaking Norwegian, I had no idea what those words meant. But I saw all of these colorful interiors, and I thought it was a paint brand. But no, it's the profile of Dagny Thurmann-Moe. Farga means color. I'm really excited to introduce you to Dagny, whom you can also hear speak on YouTube at a TedX talk she gave. Dagny Thurmann-Moe is a leading Norwegian color designer and the founder of Koi Color and Design Studio. She and her team designs exteriors, interiors, products, and develop CMF strategies for brands seeking a stronger identity through color, materials, and finishes. Dagny is known for challenging the idea of timeless design, instead creating time-bound and aesthetically sustainable environments that reflect culture, history, and human needs. Welcome, Dagny.
Thank you so much.
You have a lovely website, and besides what I mentioned, it looks like you've also done a collaboration with a company for wallpaper. And you made a downloadable manual for applying color to schools, which is really interesting to me, and we'll talk about. And I think you've contributed color for a paint brand called Pure and Original Paint. Well, your interests are wide. What was your training?
It was very far from what I do. So I went to university and studied pedagogy, sociology, and informatics. So I am basically self-trained.
So how did the original projects come in, which taught you? How did it all get started then?
This has actually been like a lifelong kind of love story with colors. And so from very early age, as long as I can remember, from being like 3, 4, 5 years old, I was very much into the colors on my clothes. They were a very important form of communication for me. And I used to change clothes, due to where I was going. And that evolved into an interest for interiors and colors and in interiors. So when I was like 7, my mom let me decorate my own room. Colors were super important. And around 15, 16, I started devouring everything I could get my hands on when it came to research and books on interiors and colors. And I was just insatiable in a way. I could not get enough. But I never saw it as, a possible career because who worked with colors, no one.
Right.
And there were no type of education that I could pick that would, cater to exactly what I felt I needed. And from, I would say, my early 20s, I started reading research and books on architecture and historical use of colors in architecture and arts. So I've read many books.
So were the first projects that came in for you interior design? People liked how you design, and they asked you to do their apartments or their houses.
Well, kind of. When I was pregnant with my first daughter, I started a blog that was about Scandinavian style from a maximalistic perspective. This was around 2007, where, grayification of Scandinavia in particular was, in full bloom, and I hated it. And everyone were saying, like, this is so Norwegian and so Scandinavian. And I was like, it's really not. Look at history. So that blog had readers from over 100 different countries. And to that, I got a job as creative director for a paint brand in Norway.
Wow.
And paint shops. So they sold paint and wallpapers and textiles. And my job was creating colors and color charts for interiors and facades, and also doing these creative collaborations and helping the stores in picking out what wallpaper designs and textiles and colors.
That must have been heaven.
Yes, it was. It was amazing. And I had like a wonderful budget.
That's incredible. You're talking about something that I plan to talk about later today, but why not jump into it? All of our understanding of Scandi design is white, pale gray, pale blue, Gustavian, all of that. Okay, I know that's Swedish. Yes, I've seen the photos of the waterfront in Copenhagen, and you see those colorful buildings, and yet the power of that idea of Scandi design it's so strong that I also really believed that throughout time, Scandinavian design, let's say interior and exterior, was all about those really pale colors. So when you're saying your blog was about maximalist Scandi design, to me, it's like, what is that? Were you the only person? Was it just you?
It probably wasn't just me, but I was, I would say, the loudest voice. The whiteness and the gray has nothing to do with Scandinavia at all. So we have no cultural historical references to gray being a popular color in any of the Scandinavian countries. That is just a trend, and that trend came from Belgian industrialism that we felt had like a kind of a connection to Scandinavian minimalism that started in Denmark and Finland in the 50s. So Denmark has been the whitest Scandinavian country, if we can call it that. Norway has very little history of using white in their interiors. There have been some shorter phases, but nothing that have lasted for more than a decade. And if we look at Sweden, they have a really strong history with floral wallpapers, for example. They're the wallpaper nation of Scandinavia. Norway has been the most colorful country of the Scandinavian countries. And we've kind of been, I would say,
I didn't know that.
The country that had the least contact with the continent. So we were all farmers and fishers until we found the oil, basically. That's simplification, of course. But we have a really strong history with textiles and weaving and using bright and complex painting or paint colors. We have the rose painting that was like incredibly bright, and then the stave churches, which are, I think, our most important cultural icon in a sense. And of course, we have Edvard Munch, the famous painter who was a master in using colors.
Yeah, what incredible talent. You're in my office. I have these yellow-green walls. It's a color I really gravitate to. And I just changed my ceiling color from white to sort of a peach color. This is the boldest mix of wall and ceiling that I've ever done. You might do it too, but I use my own home to experiment. But in looking at photos, older photos on your Instagram and all, I think I never saw a white ceiling in an interior. So is that you? Or is that Scandinavian or Norwegian tradition? Do you always put color on the ceiling?
I would say that that is very much me. I have worked with creating interiors since like 2007, 2008. And I would say from 2010, we've worked with colors on the ceiling. So it's the past 15 years of most of my career, I would say. And the reason for that is that I feel that white is really harsh. It's not a part of the color wheel. It's either the center or the end of the wheel. And if you want the room to feel harmonious and not like you have a white big like iceberg on top of your colored walls, you need to put some color pigments in there. And of course, this isn't something I invented. The inspiration I took was from historical interiors and looking at how they decorated their ceilings and what kind of color they used on the ceilings. So I just wanted to do my 2010 kind of version of it, and it turned out to be like a trademark for us.
Got it.
I'm sitting in an apartment from the 50s right now, and it has the same color. This is the fireplace living room, and it has 250 centimeter high ceilings.
I'll have to do a conversion.
My take on using colors on ceilings is, first of all, well, we need to decide what kind of feeling and atmosphere we want in this room. I think that always focusing on light is not necessarily right for any space. Some spaces need to feel more cozy and, like a little safe cave. A bedroom, for example, can a low ceiling height or the feeling of a low ceiling height or kind of like the cave feeling can give you much better sleep. So if you live in an apartment with a low ceiling height, you have a small bedroom and you have trouble sleeping, paint it all dark. Don't paint it black, but maybe a dark shade of green, for example, or blue or brown or brownish red or whatever kind of nuance or warmth or coolness you want in the room. But when if you are working on a room where it is important to have it light and airy, for example, we do use pigments in the ceiling, but we don't necessarily use very saturated colors if the ceiling height is low. So it can be more of a dusty kind of airy, light and airy tone, but never white.
Got it. Okay. Could you talk about time-bound design? How does it differ than trendy? And if a design is tied to a particular point in time, then how does it not become dated later on?
That's a really good and important question because I really want to change how we think about decor and interiors and what it means to be a representative of an era.
Okay.
Because if we look at historical interiors that we celebrate today, they're in no way timeless. They're very much time-bound. We want to, preserve and celebrate interiors that are the best representatives of the times they were made. So I think that you shouldn't be afraid to represent, the 2020s or the 30s or the 10s. Just do it in a really high quality way, do the best you think you can to represent that era with the patterns and textiles. We just have to, you have to, I think that the way our society is moving, we can't change our decor every 10 years. We need to, live with our homes for hopefully, my dream is that we create a home for someone and they keep it that way for the rest of their lives or for the period they live in that home. And if they need to add anything, that should be, like our change the cover on a pillow if it's worn out, you know. Maybe you need a new light fixture or wall sconce or whatever, you know, but just don't change the whole room.
Well, I mean, we do have such a disposable societies. It comes out of materialism and capitalism and the fact that manufacturers want to keep selling, but it's so antithetical to, I mean, environmentalism, and it's antithetical to the concept of quality. It's a really not great change in society.
I completely agree, and it's really unsustainable.
What's the makeup of your company? Are there other designers besides you, or are you the main designer and then you have support people?
I am the creative director, which means that I often have, or always, pretty much of the time, have like the vision for what we want to achieve in a project, and then I have a really talented interior architect and architects that contribute with their ideas and their competence, and we work together in creating the projects that we do. So I always collaborate with one of them on a project. It's very rarely that I do it all by myself.
Got you. And they're actually trained architects, and so someone might come to your company to build a new building from scratch?
Yes.
Ah, I didn't realize that. That's exciting. Yeah. What countries have you had projects in? I mean, any kind of from architecture to even interior design, someone's country house. I don't care. Where have you worked?
Worked in England, Belgium, the Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, of course. For the paint brand we work with, they have suppliers in many different countries or across the world.
They're not here in the States, are they? I don't think so.
They are.
Ah,
Yes, they have an agent for the US and Canada.
okay. And it's pure and original paint.
I think the Instagram handle is Pure and Original US Canada.
Okay.
US Canada, or something like that.
Okay.
But they're definitely available in the States, and it's kind of lime paint.
Ah,
Yeah, so the reason for why we wanted to work with them, I've worked with them since I started my company, which was in 2014, is that they only use natural color pigments, and it's just not plastic paint, which actual paint basically is. You know, they have plastic color pigments and plastic binder. So it's really been a joy working with them, and they're a Belgian or a Dutch brand, and really known for their shades of gray and white and beige. And then they let us, or me at the time, dig through their archival colors, and they had so many amazing colors. So we've been working on, making their unknown colors famous.
got it. That's great. Neutrals for exteriors and interiors are considered culturally as a sign of sophistication and good taste. Is it the same way where you live? Do you feel you're constantly battling a public perception, but also specific requests of your clients to go neutral, and you have to kind of push them to cover color? Or do you think because you're known as this person who emphasizes color, the people who come to you already know what they're going to get?
I think they already know what they're going to get. And if someone comes to us and say that we want something conservative that's white or gray, I'm like, first of all, that's not conservative. That's just not knowing history. And secondly, we don't do white or gray. So then you'll have to work with someone else who does.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So that means even for projects where you've been involved in the color for exteriors, even on exteriors, there isn't a beige, tan, earth tone. If you were to consider neutrals, whites and grays and beige and off-white and black, but also some earth tones, tan and mushroom and colors like that. Never?
We've worked with some beige, tons of beige, and we can work on finding a good white, but then that white will have color pigments in it. It will not be like a harsh white.
Yep.
And when we work with facade colors, we're not really into what's been popular for the past 20 years. And I talk to this with our clients. I say we're into what will last the next 400 years, and what colors that have been relevant and returning again and again and again for the past 400 years. So if you tell me that white is a classic, you don't know our history. And it's not a classic. It's not timeless, and it irritates me when someone thinks that it's timeless or when they think that it's sophisticated. And I've had this discussion so many times about but why is more elegant, and so many have been inspired by ancient Greece, Greece, for example, with the columns and the marble architecture. And the fact is that those palaces, they weren't white.
No,
they looked like they came straight out of a Disney movie.
Yeah.
The
colors are all gone. It's so amazing.
Yeah. And you know what happened during the late the end of the 1800s, like around 1890, 95, archaeologists started finding these structures. And when they found traces of paint, they actually removed those traces because they didn't want history to be the way it actually was. So they removed the traces of colors that they found because they wanted to keep this idea and ideal of Greek
classicism.
Of classicism being white.
Yeah, interesting. Wow. I had no idea. That's fascinating. I've heard I've heard some interviews, and I, of course, listened to your TED Talk. One thing that really stood out is that using slightly different terminology, you talked about something that I talk about all the time that came out of my training with the International Association of Color Consultants and Designers, which is that for an interior to be comfortable and relatable to a human, what we should be aiming to do is to create a color palette that is like nature, with a mixture of different hues, saturation, and value. That in one eyeful, you get a mix of all of it. Not to the point that it's crazy, overstimulating, confusing, because that will cause anxiety, a sort of moderate amount of all of that. And I've heard you talk about similar ideas, although when I think about that, I think about it and utilize that for interiors. But I have a sense that you utilize that concept for everything that you work on. So could you talk about biophilia, nature, and humans' need for color from your perspective?
Yes, biophilia is a really important color cornerstone, I would say, in how we work and what we work with. And it is actually exactly what you work with as well, in the way you describe it. So when using colors, it needs to be layered in a sense. If you look out on a forest with trees, for example, you will see thousands of nuances of green. Mm-hmm. It's not just one shade. And when we work with green inside, we also need it to be layered, for example. We need to add more nuances of either green or any other color that works in a harmonious way. But we also work with, we know that, for example, green plants or plants in general are important for our well-being. We know that it reduces our sick leave from work, for example. We know that it calms us and it increases our ability to focus and concentrate. We also know that natural materials, especially wood that hasn't been lacquered to death, touch it, your pulse sinks. So you become calmer. And when it comes to lighting, for example, there's something called human-centric lighting, where the lighting follows the natural rhythm of the day, which is also something that increases our well-being inside. When we work on a facade, we also want to have this variation in how or the color of the facades look. So if we think of a little village with lots of cute houses in different colors, if you start analyzing that little village, you'll see that most of the architecture is really monotonous in a sense. It looks very similar. There are not many different types of architecture or style directions, but you have difference in details, like detailing and colors on the facades and the doors and the plants. And that creates a space that feels really warm and welcoming to us. So when we work on a modern area or a street or a large housing project with many, many buildings, and our goal is always to combine colors that vary in nuance and saturation and hue, like you mentioned, um, and we know that increases the human level of curiosity. If an environment is very monotonous, where all the facades are glass or steel, for example, they're all white or gray, uh, we become more indifferent to our surroundings. We become less interested in investigating and getting to know that environment. And that is because there's not much to rest your eyes on, and there's not much to um, find or an experience. So yeah, we work with exactly the same outdoors as we do indoors, but the nuances and the actual colors that we use, or not the colors, but the nuances are very different from the ones we use inside. Because Norway, for example, we have very blue daylight, which highly affects colors when you bring them outside. So a color that can look amazing inside can look crazy when you put it on a large facade.
Do you tend to use more warm colors or cool colors, or always a mix of both on exteriors in Norway?
I would say 80% is warm colors, so nuances of red and yellow, and that includes like pink and terracotta and red and very little orange, actually, which I think is a bit sad because Copenhagen has like the best orange facades in the world. And it's difficult to get Norwegian homeowners to go there. But yeah, we do that. So the red and yellow groups of facade colors are the ones that have lived in Norway for the longest period of time. And people have been explaining that with the fact that it's the two cheapest pigments. Historically, not after plastic paint, because then the cheapest is white, which was the most expensive pre-plastic paint. Those two colors are the two colors that are missing from our surroundings during winter, when the light becomes even bluer than it is during summer, and all of the colors are removed from our nature. It just becomes gray and dead. And we know that color is energy, and the warmest colors like reds, oranges, and yellows have the longest light waves, which again gives us the most energy that we are missing because of our blue daylight and gray nature during winter daylight. So I believe that the reason for the two color groups' popularity has much more to do about health and our previous intuitive understanding of what we need with our surroundings. You can also see that with how architecture was designed before the 50s. And we do use greens, a lot of greens actually. It's the third most popular color in Norway throughout times for facades. And blue is a very tricky color here because we have blue daylight. So it can become fluorescent.
That's so interesting. Also, forgive my ignorance, because it kills me. I haven't been there yet. But just thinking back to the photos I've seen over time, and I'm hoping this isn't just Sweden, and it's Norway and Sweden and even Finland. I'm thinking about the older wooden homes that I see out in the countryside, up on the islands, what stands out for me: old wooden houses, black, bright yellow, and red, that falloon red. So are black, yellow, and red popular colors in all of the Scandinavian countries, or am I just thinking Sweden?
Black is not really common, but you have very, very dark brown. Is it called tar in English? Kind of like a treatment of wood panels with tar, which makes them a brownish black. Yeah, it can look black, but it's brown. So yes, I would say that those are the most popular facade colors in pretty much every country that is placed in the same section of planet Earth up north. If you look at Greenland, you will see the same colors.
Okay. Where do you start when you're working on color for a large exterior? Let's say, I don't know if you do more new builds or they come to you because it's an older community or building or set of buildings and they need a facelift. They need a renovation. So where do you start when designing? Obviously, you have to start with the architecture. You have to start with the purpose of the buildings and the surrounding and all of that stuff. But thinking about color, where do you start? What's your process?
We work with both historical buildings, like from the 1650s, to future architecture that hasn't been built yet. And we always start with the surroundings. So often we map the surroundings and we do an aesthetic analysis of the colors and materials we see in the surrounding areas and streets and the actual street that the building or the project is.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on the size of the building. We have different strategies in using colors. If it's a small wooden house, we very often complexify the palette. For the past 20, 30 years, a lot of them have been painted white or gray or whatever with white windows. And that's just wrong when you look at history. So we try to reintroduce the historical principles on how to create a color palette for this type of architecture.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to larger buildings, like above 2 stories and up to, like 14, 15, we try to figure out how to make this volume look smaller.
Okay.
So we all very often split up volumes into maybe 2 or 3 sections, and we often split them up both horizontally and vertically,
mm-hmm.
depending on the size, because we try to create like a human scale, even if it's not there. And color can be a really powerful tool in making a structure seem smaller than it is. So I often say that temporary architects are experts at making large structures seem bigger than they are, and we want to make them smaller, and we think that's really important for good surroundings for humans.
Interesting. One project of yours I really love were those that set of row houses in Oslo.
Yeah.
They started off a sort of tan color, tan beige, covered in graffiti, and they weren't old. And it was an incredible transformation. For those who haven't seen it, and I'll have a picture up on my show notes on Let's Talk Paint Color. The colors you chose, I would not call them pastel, but nor were they very saturated. They were sort of light mid-tone. At least that's how they appeared in photos.
Yeah.
A couple of the houses seemed larger, slightly bigger architecture than the others. The terraces were in different places, and it seemed like those larger houses got slightly lighter colors, which was very interesting. They all had inset doorways. So the volume pushed back for the doorway, and you added color to the walls of the inset as well as the front doors. But how you treated each inset entranceway was different. So it was not uniform. For instance, from what I recall, one of them had a super striking, intense cobalt blue front door, where others had more mid-tone, less saturated front doors. So I thought that was a really interesting approach to how you added color to these houses. And I wondered if you could talk about why you gave up on this idea of symmetry for each interior entranceway. They were not equally saturated, even though different colors, and why you varied it up like that. What was the idea?
That's actually biophilia.
Okay.
So it's all about creating something where you, as a walker by, feel like there's something to discover here.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important that it doesn't feel like there's a system. Nature is not systematic in any sense.
So you wanted a little randomized. You wanted it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to feel randomized, but still kind of like related. So it feels good to look at, but it doesn't really, you can't really make sense of it, but it still makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think that we work like that with very many of the projects we do. Because I feel that is what we need from our cities. We need them to be interesting, and we need them to be make us think. You know, it's like the indrawn entryways, for example, was something we really appreciated in the architecture, because when you walk on the sidewalk,
Mm-hmm.
you walk by these houses, there is something new to see from every single entrance. And when these houses were painted, we got, and people understood that it was us that were doing it. We got so many messages and thank you notes, and people saying that they'd changed their route to work, for example, because they just wanted to pass this.
Mm-hmm.
It felt so good to look at.
It was almost like it's almost like candy colors.
It's actually historical paint colors. The base colors are historical, inspired from the wooden houses in Grünerløkka, which is an area in Oslo with a lot of older buildings, and we've combined those with more contemporary colors, or colors that are more available with modern paint. So there's. And this is something we often do. We take historical colors and nuances and we mix them with contemporary, because we want that little touch of the time we're in.
Right.
But we still want it to be connected to the surroundings, so that 10 years or 15 years from now, it will still make sense that those houses have those colors on them.
Got it.
Yeah.
I really like how you handle saturation and intensity of colors on exteriors. I think it's one of the hardest things to work out. I mean, it's so, we all run to hue to make that it's going to be pink, it's going to be terracotta, it's going to be green. But these nuances are really make or break the design and also affect the combination of the colors hugely. It's not just about green next to pink. It's about what green next to what pink. And I feel that that's something you've really, really learned well and excel at. Um, I, I don't know if it's something you can articulate or not. Can you talk about how you choose the chromaticity or saturation of a color for an exterior?
For an exterior, we always use less saturation and chromaticity than you think you want.
Mm-hmm.
The color becomes, more up on a facade. But we know that we can take more color, for example, on the first floor or the ground floor. We know that we can handle more colors on details, for example. We have a lot of experience with what nuances work on a building and what doesn't, and what works on a large building and what doesn't. And we want, when we work with a city, for example, and an apartment complex with commercial spaces on the ground floor, for example, we want that ground floor to be really beautiful and stunning, and maybe just calm it down a bit when we move up. And it's I would say it's all about using very dusty colors mainly, but not too dusty. Or it's a combination, because when we work with yellows, for example, we can use a lot of chromaticity and saturation, but when we work with a green, we can barely have anything.
Interesting. Are you always using the same for exteriors? Are you always using the same paint brand because you like that paint? No. Is it the project dictate what paint to use?
Yeah, and what type of material. So sometimes
Right.
we can work with tiles, for example, or bricks, and then we combine that with maybe lime paint or um, we have very many different products that we work with and very many different fan decks. And then we also have our own samples, which we have a lot of. And sometimes we try to use a new color for an exterior, lavender, for example, which is incredibly uncommon. And we're like, we want to put lavender on a big apartment complex. Yeah. And then we try to, and then our goal is to make it work and feel completely natural together
Mm-hmm.
with the more historical reds or yellows or brick colors, for example.
Yeah. Fabulous. When you think about these historical buildings in Scandinavia being these colorful buildings, these reds and terracottas and yellows, and I see a lot of pink. You use a lot of pink. I love pink. Do you get a lot of pushback from people? We don't want pink, or because I've seen some just beautiful pink buildings that you've done, and is it rare or no?
The reason for why we do a lot of pink is that it has been a historically significant color that has been completely removed from our cities and streets and buildings. So we often call what we do kind of like city repair or street repair. And then we can see that we have a really beautiful yellow facade here, for example, and next to that would be perfect with a red. Or we have a brick building here and it would be really work well with a pink. And when we have people saying that we don't want a pink facade, I just say it's a light terracotta.
Ah, that is so great. It reminds me when I send my colors. This is for residences. When I send the color chart with the colors to my client for remote jobs when I'm not in the same place, and then order color samples and have them sent to them, I always tell them these two things. Do not look the colors up online. They are not accurate. They'll just bias you unnecessarily. And please ignore the names, because every other name in a Benjamin Moore fan deck is such and such gray, and they're not. They're just muted versions of a real hue. And
Yes.
if you see gray, you go running away, but I told you I don't want gray. Ignore the names. So it's very funny. There you are saying, call that pink a terracotta and you'll get away with it, right?
Yes.
Let's switch gears for a minute. That manual for color for schools. Uh, um, were you employed to come up with a manual, or were you asked to create color for schools and from that came a manual?
No, I actually worked with colors for schools, and then we have kind of like a set of rules and guides called Universal Design, which is about creating public spaces that are welcoming and easy to interpret for most people or everyone, So if you have issues with your eyes or if you can't hear or whatever, you can still read the room outdoors. Um, and a company that worked with that contacted me and they were like, we want to apply for funds to create a guide for the use of color in schools, and we want to do it with you. And I was like, yes, this is been talking about for so long. We used to do courses together with for architects and interior architects and how to use something called luminance contrast, which is an important part of this universal design set of rules. Yeah, it was a really wonderful project. We wanted to be easier for architects and interior architects to use or choose colors for the different types of rooms that they would be completely sure would work. Because there's a gap in competence for um, these roles. There hasn't been a lot of focus on colors in the education of interior architects and architects for decades. So they just didn't know what to choose and what colors would actually work. So we wanted to make it really simple and picked out, the best color codes to use for the different types of rooms in a school. And that guide has been so popular. It's widely used today. So we still get feedback. Yeah.
Incredible. That's incredible. Did you use studies, because studies have been made about color for schools and how the different colors work for different age children?
Yeah.
Did you factor that in?
It's difficult to use all of that research, to perfect it because you can only work on the large surfaces and the furniture. But we do as well as we can, to make it easy to make choices that fit the age groups. And we use research that have been used both for schools and hospitals and other kinds of institutions because they often point in the same direction, so it gives extra safety and making the right choice.
Got it. Okay. Do you want to just give us some just very basic principles that you applied, the guidelines that you came up with regarding color?
When we work with elementary schools, it's really important to make a space that feels safe. And maybe it doesn't feel that much like a warehouse like most of Norwegian schools do today. They feel very, very sterile. So we often have to use vinyl flooring, for example. What we often do in the classrooms is to use vinyl that looks like wood flooring. Creates like a softer atmosphere, and it's fake flooring. And I know that most architects hate fake surfaces that pretend it's something else than what it actually is. Kids, it has a really important effect. That's the feeling of something more natural. And then on the walls in classrooms, we know that for focus and concentration, the colder colors are the best. So like dusty light shades of blue or green or bluish green. It's really important that they're not too bright. So they have to not be very saturated. With chairs, for example, they can have brighter colors on them. And for the desks, the absolute best choice is wooden, which is calming to kids. For the public zones where they're, like moving from classroom to classroom or from, different types of rooms, we want it to be really warm. When you make fitted furniture for those classrooms with the muted colors on the walls, use bright but calmer colors on the fitted furniture. Try to get green plants in there, which is something we've worked a lot on achieving, because we know that for kids it really reduces outbursts in the classroom if of a lot of green plants in there. So that's also an important factor. We try to implement some kind of something that gives you a feeling of wonder, like curiosity, something that you can experience. That is, I think that feeling of wonder is something that we don't work with a lot or enough in today's society, and it's really important for kids to have that curiosity, both when it comes to learning and just life itself.
Well, I was going to ask you, what have you not worked on yet that you hope to? You kind of mentioned a lavender building, but is there anything else, not necessarily a color, but a kind of project, anything like that?
This is something that is going to happen, but that I'm really excited for. It's the government that builds, or the local government in Oslo, that is responsible for building and running retirement homes or nursing homes. We are going into a big research project with them, where we work on seeing how the environments affect life quality. And that is so exciting. And we're going to work with, both color on the wall, type of furniture, art, plants, lighting. So that's a project I'm really excited about. Other than that, I would say that we would love to do a hotel, which is more like a luxury thing. It's like the opposite of a nursing home. Uh, so I really like working, like you said, on extremely different things. And the most meaningful projects are often when we work with institutions.
Yeah. What a fantastic career. Thank you so much for speaking with me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. This was such a good conversation. I feel like we could talk for hours and hours.
And I have to say, I mean, orange and pink is probably my favorite combination. And just being able to look at you in that hot pink shirt with that terracotta wall behind you, it's really been fantastic.